Well, it's been a wild second half of the year, hasn't it? Of course, just in the sense of how this year has been going, because 2021 has been a wild ride, but also with this channel. It's been about 5 months since I started to start this old thing up again with reviews and essays. And it's been an incredibly fun ride just to make all of this. And now look where it's gotten us. 600 people. Perhaps it's small in YouTuber numbers, but that's still an incredible amount of people to have come to this channel. Seriously, I don't know how to thank you all enough for the growth of this channel. Giving this a second shot was completely on a whim, and yet it's turned out better than I could have ever expected. I have a blast making each and every deep dive on this channel. I can't put into words how happy it makes me that people seem to genuinely care about what's made here. Even if sometimes it strays from the usual video game video essays with either shows or whatever the heck ideas I want to pitch. You all seem to be interested in it no matter what I make. Just the fact that some people decide to stick around for the ride means the world to me. But I have to cut the celebrations just a little bit. Because despite the moderate success of the review side that I couldn't be happier to see, most of those subscribers don't come from the videos I put my heart and soul into. No. Instead, they come from another video. One that I decided to keep up as a joke, and since it did surprisingly well back when it was made. One made to catch on to a viral trend in the most lazy way. A video that has become a demon for me, haunting me wherever I go with my content. Unable to ever escape it. That video is Let It Grow, but read the description. This video has haunted me for ages, mostly amongst my friends you can see in the Paradise Radio streams. I cannot escape this video. Of all the videos to make a comeback, it just had to be this one apparently. It came back from the dead to haunt me, and now my friends won't shut up about the Lorax, O'Hare, or Let It Grow. You what I love most dearly is corrupted by this filth, and it drives me to near insanity. So today, I want to put this demon to rest. Today, we're covering the origin of this video, where the meme started, the greatest tale of all time. Today, we're covering The Lorax 2012. The Lorax 2012 is an adaptation of the original book made by legendary author Dr. Seuss. The movie was produced by Illumination, the animation studio behind the Despicable Me franchise. The adaptation mostly follows the original plot of the book most people will know, following the greedy Onceler, as the Lorax tries to stop them from cutting down all the truffula trees to make money from turning them into thneeds. The movie does change up things for better or worse, by not only changing this original plot to make the Onceler more sympathetic and just adding weird aspects, but also the movie adds in a secondary plot with the boy from the original book, now named Ted, as he lives in a dystopian hellscape run by a new villain who sells fresh air to the mindless civilians. Yes, that is the actual plot. The Lorax is such a strange film that was polarizing when it came out, and then became one of the strangest fandoms to grace the world. It's a movie that made so many weird decisions with itself that it's just fascinating to look at. I've been enamored with this movie for the past few months, even with how much it torments me. There is so much to look at here, so today we're going to dive deep into this film to put it to rest. I'm going to look into the production of the film, past adaptations, every single way to view the film that my friends have thought of, and the surprising impact of this movie. This isn't going to be the most organized video, and some sections are going to be pure shitposting. so feel free to skip around wherever you want in this video. Now, without further ado, let's dive into this thing.
I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees. I speak for the trees have no tongues.
As said before, the original children's book was made by prolific author Dr. Seuss, who needs no introduction. Seuss has created some of the most recognizable characters for any child, with the Cat in the Hat, the Grinch, and of course the Lorax. The vibrant illustrations with such a distinct style, mixed with Seuss's creative wordplay, leaves them as delightful reads even for adults, and the Lorax is no exception. The Lorax is one of Seuss's best known works and was said to be his personal favorite to make. The story, as I stated before, follows a boy who comes to hear the Onceler story, a greedy businessman who cut down the truffula trees to make his needs, all while the Lorax tried to convince him to stop, until the very last one was gone. It came from Seuss's own environmentalist beliefs, as this was around the time the environmental movement was going in full swing. Seuss himself said the book was very emotionally charged. In his own words, "The Lorax came out of me being angry, and the Lorax I was out to attack what I think are evil things, and let the chips fall where they might." It doesn't hold back in showing how harmful these actions are, and how it can only end in everyone losing, causing wildlife to be put in jeopardy and for the resources to run dry. It somehow manages to balance this harsh tone with the usual rhyme work and fantastical imagery that is a staple of their work. The blend works seamlessly for the story, as it allows for characters like the Lorax and the Onceler to remain iconic, yet still hold as much weight as they should. The story isn't all dark though, as it does have a somewhat hopeful message, that if people care a whole lot, they might be able to make a difference and reverse the Onceler's actions. This message works great with how adaptable the book is to new times. Due to the Onceler being faceless and the boy being nameless, it shows that anyone can be them. Anyone can fall to awful greed and commit these deeds, but they can also pick up the pieces and plant the seed. Due to them not being specifically modeled after any one thing, people reading the book can easily see the Onceler in whatever environmental threat their time has. And I think that's why it remains one of Seuss's most impactful works, as people still bring it up to this day. And despite some mild controversy with people attempting to ban the book for being against logging, the Onceler is a beloved figure in environmentalism and has left quite a large impact on culture. The Lorax remains a story that almost everyone knows, and thus is used quite a lot to make statements, simply to parody, or to view from a new lens. The book was a hit and the character beloved, so it's no surprise that more media sprung from the Lorax. Though the first animation of the book wasn't the movie we're going to discuss. Instead, it was a TV special that expanded upon the original story while staying mostly the same. Dr. Seuss stories got quite a few TV specials made like this, produced by various studios, but all written by him. Some of these are absolute classics like The Grinch and the Cat in the Hat, while others are on the stranger side like Grinch Night or the absolutely insane The Grinch Grinches the Cat in the Hat, which I do recommend checking out if only for how insane it is. The Lorax falls in the middle of this spectrum. Quite beloved, but not as well known as the others. There are probably quite a few people who don't even know it got a special. The special has quite a lot of similarities to the more popular ones, with the same type of overall narration, animation style, and how the special is full of a lot of mini songs to keep up the energy. While it is limited because of its time and also the fact it was only a special, the overall animation is very nice to look at, and more importantly, it nails the Seuss style. These specials have always done a wonderful job in translating Seuss's style to motion, without losing the charm of the illustrations. The writing also stays in line, though that is no surprise since Seuss himself wrote all these TV specials. It has all the classic Seuss mannerisms, with managing to make every line rhyme, to use of whimsical language and strange words, just throwing some things in for pure fun. It stands at the same quality level as the more iconic Seuss specials. But beyond just being a good adaptation, the Lorax special goes a bit beyond, as it adds to its source material. Of course, some of this is in ways that only really got runtime, with some songs or random visual sections, but others hit at the themes of the book and expand upon those. In this special, it gives us much more focus on the Onceler, and the overall commentary on business, worthless consumerism, and urbanization is much more prevalent here. The special also makes the story more nuanced, as it actually gives the Onceler some internal conflict. Unlike the original where the Onceler refuses to listen to the Lorax outright, here the arguments hit him harder, and we get these brilliant sections where he has to argue back and to himself with excuses. From the idea that someone else would just cause his harm for him, to the problem of job loss. He tries to argue away the Lorax till he has to face the fact that none of it matters, because this line of action simply can't continue without causing lots of harm. And yet, just as he's about to change his ways, greed pulls him right back into it, before his business is lost along with the trees, adding even more tragedy to the original story. And with this TV special seeming to have expanded upon the initial story well, a movie shouldn't be that big of a leap, right? Well, it shouldn't have been, but then again, you can say the same for a lot of Seuss's work. Let's talk about previous Dr. Seuss movies and the rocky development the Lorax went through.
Yeah.
You gotta be kidding me. You really think people are stupid enough to buy this?
Being such classics, it should be no surprise that Seuss's work has been adapted into many movies by many different studios. Previous Seuss movies had been handled by Imagine Productions and Universal for The Grinch and the Cat in the Hat, and then by Fox and Blue Sky for Horton Hears a Who. Although all of them take the books in very strange directions, and these directions vary in the quality they provide. They range from the cult classic, to the god-awful, to the absolutely bizarre, yet pretty good. And absolutely bizarre seemed to be the direction the Lorax was supposed to take, as Dr. Seuss's wife was apparently very happy with the work done with Horton Hears a Who, and the screenwriter Cinco Paul and Ken Dario, the duo that made Despicable Me, along with the producer and founder of Illumination, Craig Meledandri, approached her about tackling their favorite of Seuss's work, The Lorax. Obviously, she agreed to let them handle it, and the film entered production. And immediately we hit one of the things that is a possible factor in the movie's less than ideal state, because Illumination is quite the infamous studio amongst animation fans. While they have produced really standout films with the first two Despicable Me movies, they're most well known for being very safe, bland, and horribly corporate. Illumination is one of those studios where you can tell they care mostly about making money more than creating actual art, with how much they focus on marketing stuff like the Minions more than their actual stories. Illumination is just a studio that has never struck a chord with me after their first few films. They don't take many risks, and their plots end up feeling very predictable with the most basic blockbuster beats. And for a story as whimsical and strange as Dr. Seuss's, it doesn't bode well for the movie. But there was hope, as there was serious talent and passion going into this project, with the talent behind Despicable Me combined with the work of composer John Powell and many talented celebrity actors. With talent like that, it should still end up around the same quality as either Horton or Despicable Me, right? Well, a rocky production doesn't seem to have helped there. Although there isn't much covering the production of this film, from what little I can find, it seems to be a classic clash between corporate and creatives. Not much is said, probably due to the fact that most are still working for Illumination, and thus need to say hush hush, but we do have a small account from Cinco Paul. Apparently him and the rest of the team had a very different vision in mind for the movie. That was until the higher-ups made them change things, from making Ted's motivations not about trees, to, in his own words, making the story much more of a buddy picture than we'd wanted, amongst many other things. This can easily be seen not only in the film itself, but in where this comment comes from, Biggering and the other cut songs for the movie. While some don't show much of anything, Biggering especially shows a much different version of the movie. It delves much more into the Onceler's greed and the original themes of the book, along with being much darker in general. Many people have already sung praises for Biggering, so I'll save it for later, but it's just a fantastic piece of work, and I'll look into what the movie could have been before the higher-ups got their hands on it. But sadly, that clash of views for the movie and Illumination habits to play things too safe turned the movie into something else. And Illumination's influence managed to destroy the message before the movie was even released, with the absolutely bizarre marketing the movie got. Not so much in the trailers themselves, as they were the standard fare for animated kids films, but in the last thing you'd expect for the Lorax: brand deals. The Lorax, a movie made as a critique of consumerism and the ways capitalism can easily go too far, was used by Illumination for so many brand endorsements. 70 in total, in fact. While some of these make sense, such as the EPA or Whole Foods, some of them are laughable for how they spit on the message of the story. Lorax Approved was slapped onto products such as disposable diapers, IHOP, HP, and a friggin' SUV. Yes, for some reason, Illumination thought it would be a brilliant idea to market a gas-guzzling Mazda SUV with the Lorax. Not an electric car, not an alternative transportation method, just a good old-fashioned polluting SUV. I don't think I have to explain why this is both awful and absolutely hilarious. As others have pointed out, this is literally what the villain of the film does. Take the likeness of this environmental character and use it to promote the products killing those environments. This got so many people up in arms and refusing to see the movie, and it was a bad first impression that would only get worse when the movie actually came out. So, let's delve into this strange movie finally.
I'm not bad. I'm the good guy here. He just doesn't get it. Do you think I'm bad? Thank you.
The movie itself as a piece of media is interesting to say the least. I can't say it's all bad, but it certainly isn't good. It's a movie with some good aspects, but the foundation with the plot and writing just can't hold any of it up. This is a movie that tries its hardest, but it's just fundamentally broken. The movie follows the original plot of The Lorax, the Onceler falling into greed as he cuts down all the truffula trees, with a few additional things to add runtime. But it also adds the side plot that follows the unnamed boy from the book, now known as Ted Wiggins. These sections in Thneedville involve Ted trying to get a real tree from the Onceler for reasons we'll get into later, all while dealing with the greedy O'Hare, who sells fresh air to the citizens of Thneedville and hates trees. Now, this doesn't sound too bad on paper. After all, expanding the plot with more elements worked for the TV special, and perhaps the secondary plot could allow for them to explore the themes from a new angle, and no, I can't do this. The extra stuff in this movie is completely worthless. Unlike the TV special, the added elements don't mesh with the original plot, whereas that one gave us more depth to the Onceler's motivations and a more nuanced view on the clash between business and environmentalism. The extra stuff here either is just mindless filler to make it more of a kids movie, or has so little to say compared to the original. Thneedville and O'Hare are the most forced and ham-fisted way of saying business is bad for the environment compared to the original book, as it isn't a slippery slope where people's good intentions become blindsided by business. Nah, some people are just pure evil and have no motivations beyond money. Which may be true for some parts of society and our recent billionaires, but that's a story for another day. And the changes to the original plot also make that one much worse. Of course, there's a change that everyone points to of them showing the Onceler's face, which removes the aspect of showing that greed can hit anyone, but honestly, the more I think about it, I feel like the movie could have still worked perfectly fine expanding the Onceler as a character instead of a concept. The problem is that they don't do it in great ways. The first is that, in my opinion, they make him way too sympathetic. The Onceler starting with a good heart is a key part of the Lorax's narrative, but they make it so his later decisions that turn him into a bad person aren't even his. As one element they expand on from the original book is the Onceler family. Once a throwaway joke, now we have a full cast of side characters. the Onceler's greedy and awful family who pull the well-meaning young man in a bad direction. I really do see what they were going for here with the message of peer pressure, but I think it ends up being less satisfying and makes the message of the original less impactful, as now the Onceler's bad actions don't even feel like his fault, even with the whole villain song he gets, because we just got shown he wanted to do the right thing till his family made him be bad. In the end, it leaves the audience with the feeling that he's taking the brunt of the blame when everything goes bad, and his family just gets off scot-free. It also ruins the message that the Onceler is supposed to give, that it's his own greed that makes him lose his morals. In fact, the Onceler's slow decline into environmental destruction is glossed over, as they just squeeze it into one song where we barely get to feel the impact of it. Pacing in general is one of the movie's greatest weaknesses, as some aspects really needed more screen time to feel impactful, and other things just don't need to be here. This is especially felt with the Onceler's plot, as the structure is just completely off with it. So much time gets spent on setup with how he arrives, the first conflicts with the Lorax before he actually does anything big, and pointless cute animal scenes. It's incredible that with how short this movie is, that it still has this much filler. So much of it could be easily cut with most of the tree cutting scene, the entirety of the river scene, and a lot of the stuff with the Onceler's family. Conversely, the most important parts are just glossed over. How bad can it be is all we get for the Onceler's downward arc. He starts where he basically was at the start of the book, and in 3 minutes with no character depth or anything the original properties gave, we skip forward in the arc completely. The entire focus of the source material is gone in favor of the filler I mentioned, and the Thneedville segments. It spent too much time clearly trying to get us attached that what actually happens to things can't register for us to feel anything. All the emotional stuff, aside from maybe one or two things, falls flat on its face because of this. It becomes a movie where it feels like nothing happens for almost all of it until the last 20 minutes where it speeds through the actual plot. And sadly, the actual writing doesn't save this structure. The writing isn't anything awful, but it's not great. A lot of the time it just feels like it's going through the motions to progress the plot, not having much soul to anything. There are bits where it's really fun, but that mostly shines with the Lorax and Onceler's dynamic, and Granny Norma. The rest can really suffer from just feeling so generic and like any other kids movie. A generic kids movie also really applies to the jokes at times, as so many of them feel really forced and are just there for the trailers. They range from alright to absolutely annoying with the animals. Yeah, it's painfully obvious Illumination made this due to the fact they put budget minions into it with the fish and other wacky animals they decided to expand into characters. They're all just bad comedic relief. They have a couple good visual gags at best. Perhaps it's just me being jaded, but they just don't work at all, and are clearly there for, once again, advertising. It so clearly tries to appeal to the audience that it ends up feeling fake and unenjoyable because of it. It's the classic pitfall with Illumination's later work. Too safe to ever be anything special. But flipping to the other side of the coin, there are some genuinely good things about this movie. The first is that the comedy does land good sometimes. There are a few good ones here, especially with some of the banter between the Lorax and the Onceler. But most of the good comedy comes instead from the animation, which leads itself to some really good slapstick and visual comedy. It just has a really good sense of timing, and there's some good running bits from how the brothers are animated to gags around O'Hare's height. The animation team clearly tried their hardest here, and it does pay off as you can feel the love they put into this, as despite being held back by very generic human designs, they really managed to make everything very expressive and alive here. It's hard to explain, but it just has a certain energy to it that makes it very enjoyable, though it is held back a little bit by the overall design feeling a tad boring. Another aspect that really stands out is the voice acting, as aside from a few roles, it feels like the cast really tried their best with these performances, or at least had a lot of fun with them. This is one of those cases where the celebrity voice cast for an animated feature works out in its favor, as it doesn't feel like the big actors are just there. they seem to actually put in some effort. They manage to carry a lot of the material they get, especially with Rob Riggle as O'Hare, Betty White as Granny Norma, Danny DeVito as the Lorax, and especially Ed Helms as the Onceler, who kinda just carries so many scenes. But perhaps the biggest saving grace of this movie is the soundtrack, both in just the backing tracks and the original songs for it. All of the music for this film, aside from the credits themes, was made by John Powell, a composer with a lot of experience from both working with Hans Zimmer on movies like Kung Fu Panda and working on the How to Train Your Dragon movies music, along with a few other movies like Happy Feet and Shrek. This is a movie with a score that doesn't need to go as hard as it does, but my gosh, it goes. Soundtrack music isn't usually something you pay attention to in a movie, so the fact that it gets so good that even me and my friends noticed it during a casual viewing should say something. It's just a really great orchestral soundtrack that sets the tone perfectly for any scene, almost telling the emotional story of each scene it's in perfectly. Here's just a few examples. Along with just sounding great in general with the use of different instruments and good composition, it also uses leitmotifs excellently, as it calls back to not only familiar sound fonts for each location and character, but also pulls from the actual songs to create really incredible musical moments. Not every track does this, but when it does, boy does it hit hard. Standout tracks like this are Thneedville Chase and Funeral for a Tree, but there's still great tracks that stand on their own, such as Valley Exodus and Granny to the Edge. But none of that compares to the full songs of the movie, which are absolute bangers. These were produced both by Powell and also Cinco Paul, one of the writers for the lyrics. They aren't the best musical songs in terms of telling the story, or the most unique, as a lot have the same poppy sound to them, but they're just really fun, catchy songs that I think are a real joy to listen to. Songs such as Let It Grow and How Bad Can I Be may be utterly memed on now, but they're still great listens, especially Let It Grow. Though I can't help but feel the poppy and generic nature of them holds them back quite a bit, as the emotional impact of some of these songs is lost, especially with How Bad Can I Be. I can't fault the composers for this, however, as looking at the beta tracks, especially the song How Bad Can I Be replaced with Biggering, it's clear some of the overall personality and especially storytelling was sacrificed in order to make it more appealing to mass audiences. It's a shame, as well, the songs are definitely the movie's best feature. They could have been even better if the movie's production wasn't done in the Illumination style. But now that we've analyzed the film as a whole, let's delve into more specific aspects I want to talk about, aka my shitposting.
Growing in my backyard.
So if, say, I'm just thinking out loud here, if a guy somehow got you one...
F*** Ted Wiggins. This honestly started as a joke between me and my friends, but Ted Wiggins is actually a god-awful protagonist for this movie. His motivations absolutely do not line up with the message of the movie, and he's never entertaining to watch. He's genuinely one of the worst characters in the film. So, let's dive into all the pitfalls they fell into with Ted. To give them a little credit, I can honestly see why they chose Ted as a protagonist. But the boy in the book is the POV character for us, and thus the natural choice to expand upon. But not only does it completely miss the point of the boy being a stand-in for anyone, as to leave the choice of whether to care for the trees on the readers, the ways they expand upon him are just awful. Let's dive into perhaps the worst part of his character, his motivations. In the original book and adaptations, the boy's care for the seed is presumed to be just from a general care for the environment and wildlife, a real want to help them regrow because it's good for everyone. But they couldn't keep it that simple and altruistic, because Ted doesn't give a damn about trees or the environment. Instead, his goals are both selfish and creepy. The only thing Ted is shown to care about is his crush, Audrey, a whimsical girl with a dream to see actual trees again. She genuinely wants to see the beauty of nature and also overthrow their capitalist hellscape, but mostly the beauty of nature. Yet, her description of trees and beautiful mural of them aren't what convinced Ted to care for the environment he never knew existed. No, he starts caring only when he gets told that she would marry anyone who brought her a real tree. Ted doesn't care about the environment at all. He's just a simp. But this shouldn't be so bad. I mean, it's not a heroic motivation, but at least understandable, right? Well, about that. This whole plotline has one fatal flaw to it. It's that Ted is 12 and Aubrey is 15 at minimum. But for some reason, it's treated like an actual possible romance and not some weird, creepy obsession. I don't know if Ted is in the wrong here for trying to go for this, or if she is for returning the attraction, but it's weird either way to have this romance plot between a 12-year-old and a high schooler treated like anything but a one-sided joke. This is literally what they parodied in Gravity Falls, but there's no joke or subversion. It's played completely straight, and I don't know who thought this was okay. But aside from that, it also just paints Ted as so self-centered, as he doesn't care about anything but getting what he wants. Who cares about being the only hope for a post-apocalyptic world? Who cares about learning from the mistakes of the past? I gotta get a C to get some book. Beyond that, Ted's motivation is also just creepy in how it's painted. Our first introduction to him is him crashing a toy plane he just bought so he can manipulate Audrey into letting him into her home and backyard. You know, instead of just talking, because Ted is the worst. Moving out of the half-joking zone, Ted is also just not a compelling character. His lack of actual care for the trees leads to the message feeling less impactful, and it makes us care less too. Not to mention, Ted has so little personality or charm, or at least anything that feels like something. The most you can say is that he's a bit of a sarcastic snarker, but he mostly just does things and is more so a vehicle for the plot. Now, you could say they didn't have much time to flesh him out due to the short runtime, but other characters like Gray, Norma, and O'Hare managed to have so much personality to them and are honestly great to watch even if they're flat. Ted has none of that. The only interesting things he does are what other people told him to do. He doesn't learn anything or have an arc. He could have had one about starting to genuinely care about trees beyond just winning Audrey, but either they made it the most subtle thing ever, or it doesn't exist and he learned nothing! The one saving grace is that most of the movie is focused on the Onceler as our other protagonist, and despite some flaws with his writing, he ends up so much more likable and fun to watch than Ted. Not to mention the side characters of Sneedville carry Ted's dead weight most of the time. But the movie would have been so much better if Ted was either completely rewritten or another character took his place. He does nothing for the plot but make it worse. In a joking sense, he's an unsympathetic, selfish simp, but he's also just genuinely bad writing.
Ted.
So in other words, the more smog in the sky, the more people will buy.
Okay, let's get this out of the way.
Let it die, let it shrivel up and...
O'Hare is the ghost of my past, a horrible creature that I cannot escape for the life of me. They have continued to haunt me ever since he was the main star of my Let It Grow video. He's never managed to leave my mind, and he will infect everything I love. I'm both terrified and yet fascinated by O'Hare as a character. He started as my greatest enemy, and ended up as a beloved icon, for he is deeper than anyone will ever know. A truly nuanced, cinematic antagonist, torn between wanting to protect what he loves and the greedy world surrounding him. He is a dark mirror of our secondary main character, Thneedville's ideals distilled into a man. So, let us dissect Aloysius O'Hare. Getting serious for a moment, O'Hare is actually an interesting character to think about and analyze. Not because of any nuanced writing or character depth, but because of what the character could have been. The side of him that the movie refuses to show us. As he is in the movie, O'Hare is kinda just there. He doesn't really have any interesting dynamics with any characters or any sort of arc to him. He's very much a one-dimensional character made mostly to just act as a basic threat for the finale. While there is a lot of missed potential from that, like I mentioned before, I can't hate the character, as O'Hare carries his weight from just being so funny to me. Most of the time, it doesn't seem to be intentional at all, but just how they try to take this character seriously is just so funny to me. It's probably mostly because O'Hare is just a ridiculous character, mostly rooted in memes for me, but just God, he never fails to make me laugh when he's on screen, and I don't know why. Though he does have some unironically funny moments, mostly carried by the voice actor for him, Rob Riggle, who puts way more effort into this than they ever needed to. Although I can admit that without my bias for this joke character, he's not really well written or needed for the movie at all, other than to make Thneedville have any stakes at all. But the thing is that he didn't need to be like this, because there's so much potential that you can even see in the movie, but it just never delves into. Aloysius O'Hare could have been a perfect parallel for the Onceler, and it's weird that he isn't, as both have basically the same starting point, and the movie literally shows us this. O'Hare started with an idea that could genuinely help people, and it just led him to greed. Because, yes, while he is selling people fresh air they could get from trees for free, there's an important factor to remember. There are no trees left. No one has seen a tree in ages. O'Hare spent his adult life with trees being gone from the world, presumably. The Onceler is keeping the last seed to himself, so replaying wasn't an option for O'Hare. Meanwhile, people were dying from smog-filled skies and stale air, so he had the idea to do something about it. O'Hare managed to create technology to make fresh air without the need for trees. And while he may have gone into it with a greedy mindset, the facts show that O'Hare's actions must have saved lives from air pollution. He started in a good place just like the Onceler, until greed from others infected him. You may say O'Hare is greedy on his own, and that's what the movie wants to say, but one scene shows how he was forced into it like the Onceler. The investor scene. O'Hare has shown the idea for a new product, one that will pollute the environment even more. He's initially unimpressed and skeptical of the idea. He's happy with his business as it is and doesn't want to create stupid products. But the investors yank him into the idea by feeding his greed. At heart, he doesn't need all of this, but this world tells him he does. He may sell products, but the air in Thneedville is clearly always breathable for long periods, unlike outside. Clearly he provides for the city as a whole, while the business people yanked him into making these premium experiences to feed greed and pride. While we don't fully see his descent, we can see other understandable decisions turned horrible just like the Onceler. His decision to not let people outside without permission is understandable when you realize it's a world full of unbreathable air, toxic chemicals, and dangerous axe machines that could still be active. The world outside is dangerous, and O'Hare could just have not wanted stupid kids like Ted to get themselves killed like he almost does. But this spiraled out of control into O'Hare becoming a dictator for a surveillance state, making it so Thneedville is more like a prison than a sanctuary. All because of his own pride that came from his greed. He's a man who gets dug so deep into all of it by others, he loses his initial vision because he can't give up the profit. The only difference between him and the Onceler is that the Onceler got his chance to make things right. Meanwhile, O'Hare dug himself deeper, and never got to reflect because the people of Thneedville murder him in broad daylight. He gets strapped to a rocket he can't control and is sent flying to slam into buildings with no protective gear. This is a public execution for O'Hare, and the only thing keeping it kid-friendly is that we don't see the end result. Back to actual analysis though, beyond the memey explanations for O'Hare being a tragic figure, he actually could have been treated like a secondary Onceler, and made so much more interesting than he actually is. But no, he was just greedy from the start and pure evil, which goes against the message the Onceler tries to show, that greedy things most often grow from humble places. O'Hare is a joke now, but if he was handled differently, he could have perhaps been a saving grace for this movie. Perhaps even part of a better plot for the movie. Speaking of which...
You don't know me, but my name's Cy. I'm just the O'Hare delivery guy.
So, we've established why the current Thneeville plot doesn't work at all. Ted is a completely unlikable protagonist who doesn't work with the overall message, and O'Hare is a one-dimensional villain whose potential for depth is completely wasted. It ends up feeling utterly worthless, as no one really has stake in bringing back trees. But Thneeville still has potential for an incredible plot within it, that can expand the ideas of the book by adding another spin on the original story. And there is a trio of characters within Thneeville that can still execute this masterful plot. Aloysius O'Hare, of course, Granny Norma to kickstart the plot, and our protagonist. A man caught in between the corporate interests and the good of the planet. One with actual stakes in bringing back trees. One with a compelling internal conflict. You don't know him, but his name's Cy, the O'Hare delivery guy. And I'm only half joking about this. I know Cy has become a huge meme because of Let It Grow, but the idea of an O'Hare worker being our POV character works to bring us deep into the conflict, and introduce the struggle between self-interest and what's good for the planet. I mostly just chose Cy because he's the only named worker, and has connection to both players in our story. The story of Thneeville is a conflict between whether they should take the risk of going back to trees no one has seen in decades, or stick to the safer option of the society O'Hare has built. While it's an obvious choice for us, it's more fun to add in these in-world conflicts to it, rather than having it just be good without presenting a case for why. This plot allows us to get more of the depth we see in the original TV special. Cy is stuck between two sides. One is Granny Norma from the Wiggins family he delivers to, the one who he hears the rumor of trees from. He'd hear the ramblings of the Onceler and finally get a chance to hear her out fully, instead of it being treated like some old fable. Her characterization as the crazed grandma would be used here to add to the main conflict, as Granny Norma is one of the only people to remember growing up with trees. No one else knows they'll work, so Cy and Thneeville have to trust their radical idea to shut down O'Hare in favor of this thing no one knows will work or not. Like I said, it's an obvious choice to us, but adding that in-universe question will make the plot more interesting than just making the characters know trees are the right choice. Cy is conflicted because he wants to trust Granny Norma, but he knows it could all just be the ramblings of two crazed old people. But Cy also has connections to the other side with O'Hare. He's close to the man as one of his best workers, so he gets to fully understand O'Hare's side of the conflict. While he is in bad faith with clear greed clouding him, he presents the argument of safety. That if society works as it is, then why should we try to change to help the planet? Why should we change from the ways that work now to shift to something more risky that could hurt us? It's clearly a flawed argument used by people in real life, but it still adds more depth to O'Hare and also gives reason for Cy to be conflicted, because Thneeville is all they know, and he doesn't know if trees would be the right option. On top of that, greed also comes into Cy's arc, as he has to struggle with whether he should side with his own self-interest or take the risk of trees and be left with nothing if it doesn't work, because he betrayed his boss and will get fired. It gives some form of stakes to the decision instead of it being empty like it is with Ted. With this plotline, planting the seed can be a big moment for Cy, when he chooses to side with the people he served and grown to know, rather than his own slice of corporate greed. It could even add some pathos to O'Hare's downfall, as it seems like he might be redeeming himself and then he falls to the selfishness that almost got Cy. It's weird to say since it feels like such a joke, but genuinely Psy as a character could have been the perfect protagonist for this movie. He has connections to everything in Thneedville, unlike Ted, and could have had an actual arc, unlike the garbage love interest plot they gave Ted. Plus, Psy actually gets to sing, and that boy has some pipes to him. You can't deny that kind of talent. But let's wrap up talking about the movie and look into what it left behind. The impact of the Lorax is strange, to say the least. Of course, there's the outside perspective where it's just a mediocre animated kids movie. Like all of Illumination's movies, it made back its budget by a lot. It was a smash hit at the box office for Illumination, but it failed in terms of critical reception, as many dug into the film for the flaws I pointed out in the earlier sections, with going against Seuss's original message, failing to capture the magic of the book, and just adding unneeded details. But the film does have those who love it for being a good kids movie in their eyes, and thus in many mainstream circles, it remains a classic. It's a very polarizing movie, though. Illumination has always been polarizing between mainstream audiences and animation fans, so this is nothing new. The strangeness came in the fandom that this film spawned. Animated films creating small but dedicated fandoms is nothing new, and wouldn't have been strange here. But this isn't a fandom for the film. No. This is something much bigger than that. This film spawned the infamous Tumblr Onceler fandom. The Onceler was a character that the internet, mostly Tumblr, latched onto with a strange obsession. There's always been debate on why the Onceler became such a sensation for Tumblr. And personally, I think it's just the mixture of being conventionally attractive, a bit of a snarker, and a sympathetic villain that made the teenage audience of Tumblr latch on and never let go. The Onceler isn't the first character to have this kind of effect, but he definitely ended up with the strangest fandom. He is the first and possibly greatest type of an obsession character that people call the Tumblr sexy man. None have even come close to the heights the Onceler saw, except maybe Sans from Undertale. Now, the Onceler fandom was like any other fandom, except it was just for one character. They made fan art, fan fiction, and the place where the weirder aspects came in, Ask blogs. For those out of the loop, these would just be blogs where people could ask the characters and question things, and they get answers like a roleplay. They're a staple of Tumblr fandoms, and started out with the usual of just being the Onceler, either before or after his downfall. The problems began to form when they found themselves in a predicament when it came to the staple of fandoms at this time, shipping. The problem was obvious. How do you ship in a fandom that has only one character? Of course, the first solution would just be to take another Lorax character and go off to the races. But the options on the table were either illegal with Ted and the Onceler's family, too freaky for 2012 with the Lorax, or unappealing with the correct ship of O'Hare. No, I will not elaborate. But the fandom wanted their ships, and ships they would get. So, they did the only logical thing you could do. They shipped the man with himself, Narcissus style. Okay, it's a bit more complicated than that, as they decide to make a second character by splitting the Onceler into two people. The regular Onceler as we first see him in the movie, and Greedler, aka the Onceler after How Bad Can I Be? It works surprisingly well for the fandom, as due to the bad pacing How Bad Can I Be caused, Onceler and Greedler may as well have been two different characters. The problem is that obviously, people were weirded out on the outside of the fandom by this Oncest, as the fandom called it. It got worse when the actual voice actor for the Onceler, Ed Holmes, was exposed to it by fans. But people in the fandom were happy to handwave the fact they were shipping a guy with himself, and so they carried on. But somehow, it managed to get weirder, as the fandom still wanted more characters and refused to pull from the actual movie. So instead, we got the Onceler Apocalypse. Hundreds of alternate universe Oncelers with different quirks were born as Ask blogs. Many of these have been lost today, and even the most comprehensive list lacks so many that were there back in the day. You got a cannibal Onceler, a Onceler who has to smoke or they'll die, painter Onceler, ghost Onceler.
He's Squidward, you're Squidward, I'm Squidward! Are there any other Squidwards I should know about? Meow. I'm out of here.
To say it was getting out of hand is an understatement, as many Oncelers were so disconnected from the original character, they were only Onceler by name alone. But somehow, some way, things get weirder from here. After the billion Oncelers, the crossovers, and every Askblog under the sun, they all smashed together for the Onceler cinematic universe, as there were several plots that tied Askblogs together into a massive roleplay. These started out somewhat normal, with a summer camp called Camp Weehawken for the younger versions of the characters where they could just RP together. This evolved into Thneedville High School, which is what it sounds like, and then it just drove itself off a cliff by letting loose a zombie apocalypse plot that started from genetically modified truffula trees and led to the end of the world and many characters' lives, finally ending the weird canonverse story of the Onceler fandom. I wish I could be creative enough to make all this up. But a fandom can't sustain itself with that level of energy, and slowly people lost interest in the character and the fandom began to die out. No big ending even with the zombie apocalypse. Just a sad whimper as people either moved on from their blogs or turned these characters that weren't anything like the Onceler into original characters through a process lovingly known as de-Oncelerization. And by 2013, the fandom was dead and gone. Even after the Onceler fandom died down, The Lorax as a movie still continued to remain culturally relevant through the years, as it lived on through memes. The Lorax has always been a figure of satire due to being so iconic. Plenty of jabs have been made towards the character, and it hasn't changed in the modern day. Or while there were smaller memes such as the I Speak for the Trees meme, the main one that pertains to the film and brought it back into people's vision was Let It Grow and the meme wave it was part of in 2016. 2016 was a big year for everything, and memes were no exception, as it was the start of perhaps the most well-known wave to hit the internet, replacement memes. This genre started with the discovery of the Nut Shack, which is a whole can of worms on its own. But all you need to know is that the theme song is really just saying, "It's the Nut Shack," over and over again. So people got an idea from an older video to make edits where every time a word was said, something would happen. A simple idea, but it quickly spiraled out of control to bring in other memes at the time, such as B-Movie, and other songs that have lots of repetition, such as All-Star or We Are Number One, which is where we find our way to the Lorax. As a YouTuber known for their We Are Number One memes by the name of Mr. Mangohead, uploaded the first Let It Grow meme with Let It Grow, but every grow increases the bass by 4 decibels and changes the color. He quickly made more and more remixes, and from there, Let It Grow was off to the races as hundreds of these memes were made, with whatever effects people could think of to add. But Let It Grow on its own was far too simplistic for meme makers, so soon more and more of the film was brought in, as How Bad Can I Be quickly became another replacement meme due to its repetition, and also O'Hare and Gray Nora became particular darlings for the meme scene due to their roles in Let It Grow. There isn't much to say about these memes as they're all quite simplistic with just simple edits or fixating on characters we find ironically funny. But as simple as they were a start for many people in terms of video making, as I too hopped on the bandwagon for an ounce of clout. While it may all have been a little stupid, it was a fun ride. It just amazes me how such a mediocre movie managed to live on in the cultural space like this. Even today, people are making Lorax memes and content, even if it's not in the big waves they used to make them. It's a film that shouldn't have had the impact it did, but I guess that falls in line with the source material that's always gotten people talking. But let's finally wrap everything up.
You done good, Beanpole. You done good.
Despite everything, The Lorax has become a strangely important film for modern culture. The film itself is an oddity with how it decides to tackle the original story, with unnecessary details and weird extra plots. It created one of the strangest fandoms that basically birthed a type of internet obsession that's lasted over 10 years, and managed to be the birthplace of so many iconic memes and internet content creators, including my own channel in a sense with how much it helped me grow. It's a movie that, despite how much I play up despising it, I'll always have a soft spot for. It's such an interesting piece of work to look at, and it's funny for all the wrong reasons. I have to thank it for what it's given me, the shared jokes with friends that I'll hold as precious memories, and something that made this channel grow insanely fast for what it is. Despite it being dead now, Let It Grow was something that allowed many people to connect and get their foot in the door when it came to content creation. It's a fun time to look back on, as the memes really were about community and building off one another. No matter how stupid they are, it's always going to be wholesome in a way. But it's sadly only memories now. Those days of meme culture are now long past us. New trends grow from what was left behind, and people will move on to bigger and better things. New content, new visions, new things to create those bonds over. As fun as it is to look on the past and reminisce, it's also important to move on and do new things. Let It Grow is a funny joke, sure, but my channel and content have long since moved on from it, and it's better now for it, I feel. Yet, I can always look back fondly on those days. Back when any silly idea would be a video. Back when there was no plan. And so, maybe Let It Grow is something to cherish then?
Nah, I say let it die.